Welcome into True Crime Tuesday. I'm Tim Dennis. Gonna start off the show fast and furious here, and it's a two-part show today. In the second part of today's show, we will be talking with Carl Denaro, who actually survived an attack by the son of Sam, and later ended up investigating the case and interviewed David Berkowitz. We'll talk about that in the second half of the program today. I want to start off right away with a special guest of ours. Vice TV has some great true crime programming. One of the shows that comes up actually tonight is called Small Town Secrets, The Disappearance of Denise Pflum. You know, it's a very complicated case, one that's been up and open since 1986, where local authorities actually have had the case open, but yet they've blundered it as well. And it looked like it was kind of an open and shut case because there is a confession, but there's also a little bit of a twist to that confession. We'll talk a little bit with the filmmaker, the co-director of this feature as well. Like we said, it appears tonight on Vice. Gianna Toboni, I'm going to get it right. Sorry, Gianna, is a multi-award winning filmmaker with more than 40 films that have aired on HBO, Showtime, Hulu, and Vice. She serves as a senior correspondent and producer for Vice News. Toboni was one of the first journalists in the world to interview ISIS fighters on the front lines in Iraq. She's covered escalating cartel violence and political corruption in Mexico, embedded with two Saudi sisters as they escaped their abusive family, forced marriages, and country's archaic guardianship system. She's interviewed the founders of Hamas in Gaza during the 2014 Palestinian uprising, tracked down Nigerian pirates at their illegal oil refineries, and interviewed an American death row inmate hours before his scheduled execution. She's also been on the forefront of the most pressing national debates, from gun control and mass shootings to transgender rights and religious freedom, and interviewed top lawmakers from Senator Elizabeth Warren to Senator Cory Booker. Before joining Vice News in 2013, she worked as a correspondent for Al Jazeera and as a producer for ABC News. Toboni was named to Forbes' 30 Under 30 list for media and is a TEDx speaker and Peabody finalist. She's received an Emmy, GLAAD, Front Page, Gracie, and Webby Award for Best Documentary Series. I'm actually, Gianna, floored by your accomplishments. I think at the age of 30, I was barely getting out of a cornfield in Iowa. In radio. Let's welcome to True Crime Tuesday, Gianna Toboni. Thank you, Gianna, for being with us. First of all, I just want to marvel at your accomplishments for a minute, if I may. Can we talk just for a brief moment about a couple of your accomplishments? Because I do want to talk about, if I can for a second, some of the things, or at least one of the things in the Middle East. I got to think it's not easy to accomplish some of the things that you did in the Middle East, including interviewing ISIS fighters.
Yeah, thanks for reading my bio, Tim. I don't think I've ever had anyone do that on a podcast or in any kind of interview. So thank you for that. Interviewing ISIS was a thrill. It was different than I had anticipated it being, mostly because, you know, the first fighter that I interviewed, and I was nervous. I mean, I was sitting knee to knee with them. I was quite close. And it was shortly after we had been on the front lines and had seen the ISIS flag. And we went back to a prison where some of them were being held. And the first one that I interviewed, he seemed like not your typical ISIS fighter, in that he said he was forced to join. He was a father of 5, a shepherd. He was uneducated. He said some people showed up to my door and said, if you don't join, then we will kill you and your whole family. And so he said he didn't have much of a choice. And then the second one was a more sort of what you would think of as an ISIS fighter. He was a young guy. He said he ran their media relations. You know, as you know, ISIS, back when it was, you know, kind of more of a threat and more of a cohesive organization, they had a robust propaganda machine. And he was one of the people who was working for that part of their group. So I was very nervous going in, and I think that it wasn't what I expected, but yeah, it was nerve-wracking nonetheless.
I mean, you see the propaganda, I guess, from the Western side, and you have to be thinking as you walk into an ISIS camp that, I mean, the chances that you're not walking out have got to be great, even though the media relations person is there. But I mean, ISIS and media relations has to seem like an oxymoron to you.
Well, to clarify, I was in a prison that was being run by the Peshmerga, Kurdish military group, and all the prisoners were ISIS fighters. But that it was interesting, to your point, to walk into a prison where, there were probably hundreds of ISIS fighters. I was at least felt like the only woman for miles, and I was walking past the metal gates, and they were all right there, smoking cigarettes, playing soccer, just kind of staring at me. And, I'm a woman, I'm white, I'm not Muslim, I'm not wearing a headdress, all of these things they hate. I'm media, I'm sort of like one of the people that they probably hate most in the world. So it was certainly a moment when we walked in and I sort of felt their presence all around me.
I got to ask this, and then we'll move on to the topic at hand. With all that in mind, how, as an interviewer, I've got to know this, how do you get them to open up?
I don't start by interrogating them. I think that's important. I start by trying to get to know who they are on a human level. And I think that's, unexpected for them. And I think it's disarming.
Okay. I bring that up because we want to get to the topic at hand, which is the special that airs tonight, Small Town Secrets, The Disappearance of Denise Pflum. You are the co-director of this, along with, help me out with her last name, Nicole
Zordmere. She's an incredible award-winning journalist.
Okay. And the two of you take on this story that dates back to 1986. Tell us a little bit about Denise's story and why exactly this case has been open since 1986.
From everything we've learned, Denise Pflum was a really impressive young woman. She was a star student athlete. She stood up for what she believed in. She had a great sense of humor. She had a great group of friends, a loving family. She was nearing the end of her senior year in high school. And, basically she disappeared. And there was really not any kind of warning signal. There wasn't anything the family could point to that, come to think of it, that person was weird, or it was strange when she did that or left this behind. As they describe it, she disappeared without a trace. And so we started looking into this story because Nicole and I were producing a documentary on domestic violence in rural Indiana. And we met an advocate who introduced us to a detective. And after a long night of looking through evidence, we realized, this is a story that we have to tell, mostly because what it looked like was that the persons of interest in this case still lived in this small town where Denise disappeared. At least one of them had a long record of domestic violence since Denise disappeared, and that was her ex-boyfriend. Mm-hmm. There were just several things that made us think, we have to investigate this case. And to us, we didn't think, we want to do a true crime series. Mm-hmm. We thought, we want to take our skills as investigative journalists who do documentaries on a wide range of things, including, women's rights. We decided to kind of take that experience that we had and apply it to this story. And 3 years later, it's now a 3-part documentary series.
Yeah, there's enough there that, as you said, you got 3 parts out of this. And some interesting twists and turns. To kind of set it up for our audience, the local authorities there found Denise. Denise was at a party, as it's understood, and it was a local party with the local kids. She had taken her parents' car. Is this correct? To this party.
So part of the story sometimes gets a little bit confused, but she went to this party the night before she disappeared. She was with some friends. Mm-hmm. They bought some beer on the way to the party. Went to the party where, as we understand it from, people in town, there may be a couple hundred people there, pretty normal bonfire party where kids are drinking, nothing sort of strange about that.
Right. Exactly.
She left her purse at the party that night. Mm-hmm. The next morning she woke up. As we understand it, she called a few friends, including, asking her sister to go with her back to the party site to look for her purse, which she had left behind. Nobody could go with her. People were working. They just, for some reason, she couldn't get someone to go with her. People who were close to her said it was strange that she wanted someone to go with her. She was an independent young person. She typically would not have asked for someone to go with her for something like that. Mm-hmm. She took her parents' car and went back to what we think, the route toward the party site looking for her purse, and nobody has seen her since.
Now, when you do a little digging around, or when you start reading different articles about Denise and the path that the car took, there's speculation, not only from the family, but from other people, that there's just no way Denise would have taken the path that the car eventually ends up in. Talk to me a little bit about where the car ends up and why people think that there's no way it could have been Denise that took that car where it went.
Well, look, I wouldn't say there's no way it could have been Denise, but I think that, if we had learned that the car was found at the party site, that would have, made sense.
Right.
Or, even closer to her own home, that would have made sense. But the car was in a different location. It was pulled off the side of the road in sort of rural farmland, which much of the county is. And there was basically no reason that the car should have been there. It's not like it was adjacent to the party site. It was an odd location for the car to be discovered. And so, a lot of the theories that we've heard and a lot of the witnesses that we spoke with, said, we think she met up with someone. We think that she maybe picked up her ex-boyfriend, for instance, and potentially he guided her to this location. Or she encountered somebody who brought her somewhere else, and then they drove the car back to this location. Basically, where the car was found, it didn't make sense that she went to get her purse and was coming right home.
Why did people think that she would have picked up her ex-boyfriend? What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, they had broken up a few weeks before Denise disappeared. But, as young people do when they break up and have been together for the past 3 years and were the love of each other's lives, it's possible that they were still talking. They had seen each other the Tuesday before. She disappeared on a Friday. So they were still in touch here and there. And, because she wasn't able to reach anybody else that morning, it's possible that she did call her ex-boyfriend and ask him to go with her. We also know from letters that she wrote to one of her good friends who moved away from Connorsville that she was feeling guilty about having, met up with another guy, potentially hooked up with another guy. Even though she was broken up with Sean, she felt a little bit guilty about it. And it was causing her anxiety. She was saying, I'm in a life or death situation. I'm scared to death to go to school tomorrow. Things like that made it seem like, okay, there's something going on with her ex-boyfriend that's making her feel this sort of overwhelming emotion.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit with you. Now you're talking about her ex-boyfriend. Her ex-boyfriend, of course, is Sean McClung. Sean gets into a little bit of trouble a little bit later in life, not necessarily because of this case, but he does go to jail, correct?
Sean was charged multiple times and convicted of domestic violence charges, intimidation. One of the detectives told us that he had held a former partner essentially captive. We had heard of some just really horrifying allegations of domestic violence, but his record backs it up. He had demonstrated very violent behavior toward former partners. And when we, talked to the independent detective, Stacey Reese, who had been looking into this case, is still looking into it, but has been looking into it for years. She said, when you have an ex-boyfriend who in the years after their partner disappears demonstrate this type of behavior and it's on record, that's someone that you need to look into. Right. Unfortunately, based on what we know, Denise's ex-boyfriend wasn't looked into back then. And there were things that were sort of strange that was happening with him. For instance, he, as we know it, he didn't join the search party. Apparently, a relative of Denise's drove by and said, "Hey, Sean, have you seen Denise?" And he said, "Oh, no, she'll be back. No, but it's not a big deal." He left town, moved to Arizona shortly thereafter. There were just a few things that just seemed sort of strange.
Which is interesting in itself. I mean, normally you would think those are big flashing red lights that the authorities would want to look at, that, Sean himself is not actively worried or involved or concerned, for that matter, for Denise's well-being.
And that's a good point, Tim. And that wasn't sort of the only thing that we thought, just seemed sort of out of place about the original investigation. And look, maybe this is common practice. It was surprising to me, but the original detective hired several psychics to lead him toward the body, to give him any kind of clues about where Denise's remains could be. He misplaced evidence. There were just things that just seemed sort of, I don't know. He just seemed a little bit in over his head. He didn't look through her bedroom and, look through any of her journals. He didn't pull phone records that could have, connected the dots for us, as far as who she was calling that morning, and this is all based on what we know, our conversations with the original detective. Unfortunately, his memory isn't very strong and he doesn't have detailed notes from back then. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these things just weren't done back in the late 80s, which makes it incredibly hard to investigate now, 35 years later.
So is he still around? Is he still alive, or is he?
He is. Yeah, he's still around. We spent time with him. He was very gracious with his time, but unfortunately he wasn't very helpful when it comes to learning more about what happened to Denise Pflum.
Does and this may seem weird, but does he have any familial or any ties to Sean whatsoever?
As far as we know, he didn't have any close ties with Sean. He was the first cousin of Denise's dad, so they had a tight relationship and they worked together, on this investigation. Nothing specifically with Sean. And when I asked him about that, especially because Sean's alibi didn't check out, he ended up failing voice stress tests. And if you've seen the series, you know the sort of big revelation that comes about with Sean. I won't blow it for anyone who's listening.
Right. We won't talk about that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But there were a lot of things that would point you towards Sean. And even when I asked that detective, more recently, I think in 2018, he said, "I just never really thought Sean was suspicious. I never really thought there was a reason to look into Sean." So I sort of think that it's not like there's some sort of corruption going on or he was best buds with Sean or something. I think it was more that this detective just wasn't trained. He was like your standard small town detective who just was, not equipped to deal with this type of case.
That's an odd statement. That especially you would think someone who is trained, that is a very odd statement because there's a lot of red flags here. Just in what you and I have sat here and talked about.
And we have to remember, now it's 2021, 2022. I think, a lot of us have, as detective work has sort of infiltrated pop culture, and there are these type of podcasts, and we've all heard about how detectives go about their work. Back in the late 80s, I don't really know what that detective knew, what he was taught, and, his police academy, if you went to that, I don't really know like the tools that he was given. Mm-hmm. So in no way am I trying to make excuses for him. I just think we live in a different world today where the detective work back then, especially in a small town in rural Indiana, I don't know if he's an outlier in terms of not being able to solve a case like this.
I have a question for you. I know you've done a ton of research here, Gianna, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Justice for Denise Pflum Facebook page. Have you heard of it? Have you been on it?
Yes.
Who runs the page? Is it someone from the family?
So, yeah, the family and a woman named Detective Stacy Reese. Okay. What happened was a few years ago, she posted on Facebook just trying to raise awareness about Denise's case, saying she's going to turn 50 this year. And the post took off. And what she learned from that is that the town was still thinking about Denise and still really cared about her and still really cared about the family getting justice. And so together they decided to create this Facebook page where, people could post about Denise. They could share any leads or tips that then the family and Detective Reese would hand over to the sheriff's department.
There's an interesting entry, September of this past year, 2021. And if I can read it to you real quick, I'd like to. Whoever's posting on this is basically asking to get access to land. And you may be familiar with the post. I'm not quite sure. In September this past year. On March 28th, Good Friday, 1986, a lady decided to take a walk down her country road after lunch. While walking, she heard off in the distance very loud screams. She was concerned about it and told her family about it when she returned home. These screams were coming from an area west of her road. When she heard Denise was missing, she contacted the sheriff's department and told them what she had heard. We didn't hear anything about it until 30 plus years later. This information came from her children that she had told years ago. We have narrowed down the parcel of property that these screams mostly came from. We have attempted to secure permission to search this property with cadaver dogs. We have been met with resistance and we have been denied access to this property. We've asked numerous other landowners who have graciously granted us permission to access their property. For years, rumors have persisted in this town. We are not here for rumors, we're here for facts. The fact of the matter is we wanted to check this location for Denise. As stated above, we went to the family who has been at the heart of most of these rumors connected to our daughter to get permission from them to check this location due to it being their property. We did this because if she's not there, we want to eliminate it from the search so we can move on to other areas. But also if she is there, we can bring our daughter home. We were turned down because it could lead to more rumors or get torn up if the dogs indicate that she may be there. Well, it says, while they have every right to deny us, it saddens us that having land to hunt on or preventing rumors is more important than searching for Denise, as rumors can live on forever. Are you familiar what it is the family is talking about, this particular parcel of land that Denise may potentially be on?
So there's a lot of land in Fayette County that has been, investigated, scoured by law enforcement, by independent detectives, by, just citizens who are interested in the case. Mm-hmm. This parcel of land, I'll just go back. The screams that you mentioned. Yeah. That's a family. Unfortunately, the woman who heard the screams is no longer around, but we spoke to her children who talked to their mom right after she heard those screams, and their account is chilling. And we interview them in the series, and what they say is that their mom heard 3 blood-curdling screams coming from a girl, a woman, a female, is how the daughter puts it. They felt confident they knew where those screams were coming from, which is in the general direction of a parcel of land that has not been searched. So from what we know from the family, from the Pflum family, they asked the landowners there if they could search the property. And for various reasons, the family did not agree to allow them to search. Now, part of that has to do with, according to the Pflums, that family didn't want, their farmland to be disrupted. They didn't want, rumors to spread around town. Now, the family says they just couldn't agree to terms of the search. Okay. And they completely deny any kind of involvement, collusion with anybody who's responsible with the disappearance of Denise Pflum. That family, though, their son has been, connected to this case. There are, several people who say that their son allegedly confessed to being involved in Denise's disappearance.
It sounded to me too, as I read that somebody that doesn't know how a cadaver dog works, because they don't necessarily tear up anything. I think the fear, according to the Pflums, based on what the family said, is that the cadaver dogs could go out there if they indicate. Then they would have. Oh, then they would tear up the property, right? Okay. Again, a fascinating case, and I wonder, I guess I'll this as we start to wrap up here. I have to ask this question: has this case, and maybe I'm going a little too far, and you could tell me if I'm in spoiler land here or not, has this case advanced past the local or even state level since it opened in '86?
So at one point, the FBI got involved. It was very brief. It was when they were doing the cadaver dog search on a pond in town that's been the subject of several confessions that we've heard. The state is not involved at this point in any official capacity. It's still in the jurisdiction of the Fayette County Sheriff's Department. However, there are independent detectives who continue to look into the case while trying to, still respect the work of the Sheriff's Department.
Okay. It is a fascinating case, a very sad case in that you would think, and again, I want to encourage everybody to tune in tonight to Vice TV and check out Small Town Secrets, the disappearance of Denise Pflum. It's a sad case that you would think, looking at everything, Gianna, that you would think it'd be easily solvable. And as you pointed out, there are little twists and turns here that make it a little more complicated. But I think, again, it's a 3-part series that you will get entranced with, you will get sucked into, and you want to, you really, by the time you start to get into it, you really want justice for Denise here and for the family. Again, my heart does go out to Denise and her family, and I hope that they do bring Denise home soon. Gianna Toboni has been our guest. Gianna, I want to thank you very much for joining me today, and wish you good luck with the 3-part series.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Folks, we'll be back here in a moment with our next guest. I want to encourage you again. The series is Small Town Secrets: The Disappearance of Denise Pflum. It's on Vice TV. Check your local listings in your area for the time that it airs on Vice TV. I want to mention real quick before we get to our second guest today, Carl Denaro, that I received a lot of really nice emails throughout the week. I want to thank you guys for doing that on both sides, with the addendum that I put up with last week's show having to do with Dr. Carol Lieberman and the Ghislaine Maxwell case. I'm going to decide at this point to leave that show up on both the free side of True Crime Tuesday and on the premium side on Stitcher. And again, I want to thank everybody for weighing in on the show. If you choose to continue weighing in on the show, you can, tim@darknessradio.com. And again, I want to thank everybody for letting their thoughts be known on both sides. And I do appreciate everyone's commentary on the show, whether you chose to decide you wanted to either take down the episode or if you wanted to leave the episode up. As I said, I value everyone's opinion. And the overwhelming opinion of people who wrote in was to leave the show up and to kind of show that darkness that was out there, to kind of shine that light on the darkness that was out there and let people know that it was there. It was also the overwhelming opinion of people that wrote in that maybe the addendum should go on the beginning of the show to let people who would tune in the future to let them, well, to be frank, to let them know that, what they're about to listen to is a little unnerving and that maybe it's not for everybody. There is that warning on the description of the show, and maybe everybody doesn't look at the warning on the description of the show. And again, that falls on me. But again, I do want to thank everybody who weighed in, and you still have time if you'd like to, tim@darknessradio.com. I just want to, again, add, we do have some of the best listeners in all of podcasting, and I do appreciate each and every one of you. And I don't say that to pander to you. I don't say that to get feel goods and have you guys, give me warm fuzzies over it. I say that because it's true. I really do appreciate that you guys took the time to especially out of your busy day, to let me know what you thought of the episode and what you thought, honestly, that you didn't hold back, that you didn't, try to pander to me or try to make me feel good out of things, that you called it as you saw it, and you let me know. And that's what I appreciate. I appreciate that we have an honest relationship and that you tell me exactly what you thought of the episode. And that's what I look forward to. I don't need any sunshine blown up my skirt, and I certainly don't want that. That's not what I want out of this. I'm looking for honest feedback, and I appreciate that. With that being said, let's take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the sons of Sam, plural. We'll explain what we mean by that, and we'll talk to Carl Denaro, who survived an attack by the son of Sam, and why he's meeting with David Berkowitz. That's coming up next on the Best in True Crime Podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the Best in Paranormal Podcasting, True Crime Tuesday. I'm Tim Dennis. We've had a great show already. It's just going to get better. I tell you, folks, I had the opportunity to sit down and watch a special on Netflix. And if you haven't seen this already, it came out in 2021. You need to sit down and watch this. You know, the Son of Sam is one of the more famous serial killer cases out there. But there's an interesting twist, and it exists out there on Netflix. The special is called The Sons of Sam, plural, A Descent into Darkness. And it will completely change your mind as to what exactly the Son of Sam is. We all assume that the Son of Sam is David Berkowitz. But I'll give you the description right from the Netflix special itself. It says, in August of 1977, the arrest of David Berkowitz ended New York City's wave of terror, but journalist Maurice Terry believed there was more to the story, and there is a lot more to this story. One of the people who was a victim of the Son of Sam, Carl Denaro, is our guest in the second part of True Crime Tuesday. Carl was actually a victim on October 23rd of 1976 when he and Rosemary Keenan were both sitting in Keenan's parked car when the window suddenly shattered, and that's when Carl's life changed forever. I want to bring in right now to True Crime Tuesday, Carl Denaro. Hi, Carl. How are you?
Very good, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with that fateful day that changed your life forever. And when I say changed, it completely flipped your life on your ear. October 23rd of 1976, you and Rosemary, of course, are out on a date. And you decide to park. Like most young lovers do, you park. And it was something that was common in New York City. And just, whatever it is you decided to do, whether you're going to kiss, whether you're going to talk, whatever it was you decided you were going to do, take me to that day and what was going on.
Sure. So I was, I guess to start the story, I was enlisted in the Air Force and went in a delayed entry program. And my report date was October 28th. So 5 days before, just kind of tying up loose ends and, hanging out with my friends. And, Rosemary and I we were friends. Not that we weren't dating. I think we'd gone on a few dates, but it was, back then we kind of hung out in groups. I met her at Queensboro Community College, and so it was just a bunch of young ladies and a bunch of my friends that hung out in various bars, and we would just meet up. So that's that was the situation on October 23rd, 76. I had walked into the bar around midnight, and Rosemary and your friends were there, and we hung out, had a few drinks, had a few laughs, and then Rosemary and I decided to leave the bar and go make out in her car. So we drove. We got in her car and drove. It was my neighborhood, so it was really no destination. In particular, we're just kind of cruising around the neighborhood, and we wound up on 159th Street and 33rd Avenue in Flushing, Flushing, New York, which is part of Queens, the borough of Queens. And, it was kind of it was a very residential area. It was dark. There was a street light there, but it was across the street. I'm not even sure if it was out or not, but the house that we parked in front of was very dark. And we pulled up, and I don't think we were there more than 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes. And next thing you know, all the windows blew out of her Volkswagen. And I'm not really sure. The way I remember it, I didn't know I was shot, but I definitely knew I was in trouble. And I yelled to Rosemary, "Start the car, let's get out of here." And she did. And I passed out for about 10 seconds. And when I came to, she was in a panic because she didn't know where she was. And it turned out we were about three blocks from the bar that we started at. So I directed her back to the bar, and she, pulled into a parking spot. I jumped out of the car and walked her to the bar, and the guy, the doorman said, "Now you don't look too good, Carl." And I said, "I don't feel good. I think the car blew up." So obviously, I wasn't thinking straight. But with that, my long hair was holding in the blood from my head wound, and my shirt turned blood red, and that's when my friends realized that they had to get me to the hospital. So they, I walked back out to the car, to my friend's car, and they drove me to Flushing Hospital, where I proceeded to get bone fragments and bullet fragments dug out of the back of my head.
What's your reaction, Carl, when you get to the hospital and they start looking at you and they realize that they're pulling out bullet fragments? What were you thinking at that point when you realize they're pulling out bullets?
That's the weird thing. And I said, none of this really makes sense, even to me. And believe me, I've thought about it long and hard over the last 45 years, because it was just kind of, I guess adrenaline had kicked in and maybe shock. But I had no idea how serious it was. And I'm laying on my stomach on a gurney, and I could feel them working on my head, but they had numbed it, so it didn't hurt. But I could feel, I could feel them working on it, and the swinging doors of the emergency room would, flap open and shut as the nurses and doctors went in and out, and I could see my friends, and I wave to them, and I know this is all very bizarre, but this is the way it happened. About 4:00, the shooting happened around 2:00. So around 4:00, a policeman came up to the gurney and asked if he should call my parents. And I said, well, my dad lives upstate New York, and, no need to bother him. And I said, well, what time is it? And he said, 4:00. And I said, as long as I'm home by 7, my mother won't even realize I was out this late. So, yeah, and that's when he looked at me and said, son, you were shot in the head. You're not going home. So that's my first recollection of being shot. But, as I, just told the story, I knew something was going on. And, but like I said, the car blew up, which obviously doesn't make any sense. So that's part of the story that I'll probably never get an answer to. It was like, how did that whole thing, how did my mind actually work that whole thing through? Don't have an answer.
I do have to ask you, what feelings and sensations do you remember? I keep in mind, I do realize it was 45 years ago, but what feelings and sensations do you remember from that? Because with a traumatic brain injury like that, with a bullet going into your head, I have to think that there had to be some sensations. There had to be some pain. There had to be some odd smells or sights or your world had to feel different.
Well, the last part of your question is 100% true. I mean, my world did get turned upside down. But I have to tell you, I do not recall any pain. The first time I remember pain is, I'm going to guess it was around 4:30 in the morning. After the police officer, asked me if he should call my parents. Some short time after that, it's a half hour, 45 minutes. They wheeled me into the X-ray room, and I remember the X-ray technician putting the back of my head against a cold plate, that they use for X-rays, and that hurt. And I told him, I said, Dave, stop, that hurts. And that's the first time I remember any pain. Now, with that said, the next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed. It turns out it was about 4 hours later. And I woke up with the worst headache you could possibly imagine. And that headache stayed with me for about 2 weeks, nonstop. And the only medication they were giving me was Tylenol. So you can imagine, if you ever had, even a toothache, sometimes Tylenol just doesn't cut it.
Right.
And Tylenol did not help the pain I was experiencing.
Did they?
But, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Did they?
No, that's all right.
Did they give you an idea as to? Keep in mind, you were shot with a .44 for the people at home that don't know what you were shot with at the time. And of course, at the time, they didn't know that the son of Sam, he hadn't identified himself at that time as the son of Sam, or the killer or killers, plural, hadn't identified themselves as the son of Sam. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we get deeper into this interview. You'd been shot with a .44. So obviously there had been significant penetration. They hadn't said how far away you'd been shot from your head, from the barrel of the gun. How deep was the penetration into your head, or did they not tell you?
They really didn't get into it that much. What I can tell you is they basically, like I said, they were digging out pieces of my skull and bone fragments and bullet fragments. When they were done, there was a hole about the size of a 50-cent piece.
Oh,
yeah, and the only thing protecting my brain from the outside world was a flap of skin. I'm not even sure how that happened. That was explained to me by the neurosurgeon about 6 weeks after the shooting. So I'm assuming if there's a hole the size of a 50-cent piece, I'm assuming there was, my head was wrapped in bandages for 3 straight weeks. So I never even, I had no interest in looking at the back of my head, but I have no idea what was going on with it. But I'm assuming that there was just absolutely nothing there except the bandage. And as the days and weeks progressed, skin grew over the hole that was created by the bullet. And of course, three months later, January 20th, I went in for surgery to have a plate inserted to cover the hole and protect my brain from further damage.
Talk about traumatic. I mean, that you are a modern miracle. I mean, a modern miracle in that you didn't die in that moment.
I'm extremely lucky, and I didn't realize how lucky I was, and for probably 10 years. By all rights, I should have died I probably never should have even made it to the hospital. But thank the Lord I did. And here I am. I'm 65 now. It happened when I was 20. So I've led somewhat of a charmed life. There's no denying that.
That's amazing. The Son of Sam killings continue through 1976 into 1977, and I don't say this lightly. I mean, there's one in November of 76. There's one in January of 1977. The city of New York is basically set into a panic, and it's when the Son of Sam letters show up to New York Police Department Captain Joseph Borelli that the killer, the 44 killer, is identified as the Son of Sam killer. And in that, these letters take on kind of a strange tone in that the letter says that I am deeply hurt by your calling me a woman hater. I am not, but I am a monster. I am the Son of Sam. I am a little brat. When Father Sam gets drunk, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up to the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drink blood. There's little clues in here. He says, go out and kill, commands Father Sam. There's little things in here where he says, I am the monster, Beelzebub, the chubby behemoth. I love to hunt. There's little things that point out things that maybe the killer himself is connected to something bigger than just a man roaming around shooting random lovers in cars, which is interesting to say the least. But the New York Police Department is out for a serial killer. They've profiled a serial killer, and there are drawings of, and they're changing constantly, drawings of a single man that's out there. During this, I have to ask you this, Carl. I take it you're paying attention to the different reports, and I've got to know what you're thinking at this point as each killing is taking place. Are you afraid for your life, and are you thinking that maybe that this person has now profiled you and may come back to get you?
Yes, that. Yeah, let me just take a step back.
Sure.
I was the second shooting victim.
Mm-hmm.
So as you pointed out, there was no 44 caliber killer. There was no Son of Sam. It was, my shooting was kind of chalked up to a drug deal gone wrong. I had long hair. You know, I was basically a hippie in 1976. Mm-hmm. And the Rosemary's dad was a detective who happened to be the detective on the case. So as you can imagine, he wasn't really thrilled with me. And the fact that, you know, he knew I smoked pot and, you know, I had long hair, and it was in an upscale neighborhood. There was really no crime, even though New York City was under siege at that time. My little community in North Flushing was not really affected by what you read about in New York City in 1976. You know, the Bronx was burning, but I lived in Queens. So they really had nothing to go on except this drug deal gone bad. And of course, my mother bought into it too, because she knew I smoked pot and she wasn't thrilled with it either. So as the shootings progressed, let me say it. When I first got home from the hospital, before I had the plate put in, there was a few instances where, you know, I was nervous about someone coming back to finish the job. I didn't really dwell on it, but I did have, you know, my mom had a big, you know, French door, sliding door going out to a terrace. And it was a fairly busy street. And I used to sit there and just watch the traffic go by because I really couldn't do anything else. And it was a few instances where a car would like circle the block 2 or 3 times and I'd get nervous. But it was always nothing ever came of it. I lived next door to a doctor, so usually these cars, not usually, all the times that when I saw a car circling the block, it was somebody waiting for their the patient to come out of the doctor's office. So I really didn't live in. Like I said, there was a few instances where I got a little nervous, but it was short lived. As the shootings progressed, it still wasn't. It really didn't affect me because the police haven't tied the shootings together. So there was a shooting in July of 76, October of 76, December of 76, January of 77, and then I believe it was March or at the end of April of 77, and that's where the letter that you were talking about, the letter that was addressed to Captain Borelli.
Yep.
That at that point, that's when the police started talking about possibly other people involved. And on March 10th, the police and the mayor's office had a press conference announcing that we have a serial killer. So that was good for me in the respect that I felt vindicated that I was no longer a suspect in a drug deal gone wrong. But it opened up a whole new can of worms, So, I was able to prove to my mother and prove to the two detectives that I wasn't a drug dealer. Mm-hmm. Now I had this bigger issue to deal with, and that is the serial killer. Is he going to come back? Is he going to come back and finish the job? And again, that was short-lived in my world because I said, what's the chances of, there was nothing in my past to warrant, like, I didn't have any enemies that would want to shoot me. I firmly believe back then that it was the wrong place, wrong time. To this day, I really don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I operated under at that time.
With that, you begin to see the Son of Sam letters come up. You begin to see the panic that takes hold in the city, and as you just stated, now you have a reason to show everybody that it's not just you, that this pattern is forming. A letter goes out to Jimmy Breslin. He publishes that in the New York Daily News. To a little bit to the dismay of the New York City Police Department. They're not too happy that he put that out rather than have it brought to them in the first place. There are more shootings, one in June, one in July. The one in July ends up being the last one. That one is the one with
Stacy Moskowitz.
Yeah, Stacy Moskowitz.
Violante.
Exactly, Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante. That's the one that I think we want to focus on a little bit, because when I say there's a difference between just Son of Sam and maybe multiple Sons of Sam, this is the case that an investigator that is focused on here in Sons of Sam, Maurice Terry, gets his first clue, and then this begins his investigation, which is focused on in this series. And that is that David Berkowitz has a certain vehicle that he uses. And I'll let you expound on it a little bit, but when Stacy and Robert are shot, they're shot by someone who is wearing a blonde. Was it a blonde wig, if I remember right?
Yeah. Like kind of like a straw, really cheap, straight hair. Almost like a Halloween wig.
Right. And then the
like a Phyllis, maybe like a Phyllis Diller, for those who remember Phyllis Diller.
Yes, yeah, like Phyllis Diller. In the previous shooting, it was a tall, dark-haired man in a leisure suit that was seen fleeing from the area. So you've already got different reports and different sketches, as we had said previously. This was a blonde-haired man, or a man in a blonde wig, who had shot them, and then left in a different colored vehicle. It was like a mustard colored vehicle, wasn't it? Something to that effect.
Well, the yellow Volkswagen.
Yeah, yellow Volkswagen.
Yeah, there was prior to that, the police were putting out sketches, and by the time this Moskowitz Violante shooting happened, there was already nine sketches, and one of them, and these sketches were taken from obviously eyewitnesses, some from victims, and some from just people who happened to be in the vicinity of a shooting, and were able to give police a description. And I could tell you that like the first sketch, which was taken from the July 29th, 76, the first shooting, to me is spot on for David Berkowitz. The other 8 photos look nothing like David Berkowitz. So that was clue number one to everyone. You didn't have to be an investigative reporter to see that. I mean, that people were talking about that long before they arrested David Berkowitz. That this is crazy. And none of these look the same. And this is, like I said, before they arrested Berkowitz, so they had nothing to compare it to. But the general consensus was these 9 sketches, they don't look alike. So how could it be one shooter?
And one of the sketches looks a little bit strikingly like John Carr, who's referred to in one of the letters as John Wheaties.
Yes.
Yes. And so there's things that are starting to line up. And Maurice Terry is the one who's pointing all of these things out. He's starting to point out that, hey, you've got some ties here between the letters and some of these sketches and some of the things that are playing out in the letters. But Captain Borelli doesn't want to seem to hear it, especially since, and we should point out too that David Berkowitz was driving a 4-door yellow Ford Galaxy, and the reason why I pointed out the fact that there was a different colored vehicle at that shooting of Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante is because wasn't there something where Berkowitz was on the other side of town at the time?
Well, he was on the other side of the park.
Yes, the other side of the park.
And and I guess the best. This shooting, the last shooting, what turned out to be the last shooting, is has the most eyewitnesses of all the shootings, and Berkowitz had parked his off-white Galaxy in front of a fire hydrant, which I've always found that very difficult to understand.
Right.
But I think there's a reason for it that I won't get into now. But
sure.
Anyway, I just think it's strange that a serial killer would who's eluded police for close to 12 months at that point would park. I mean, there's one thing about making a mistake as a criminal, but parking in front of a fire hydrant at 2 a.m. so you can commit a murder, it's kind of, to me, is ridiculous.
Right.
But anyway, he did get a ticket on his car, and somebody, one of the neighbors was walking her dog. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but basically, there's a timestamp when the ticket was given. This woman watched Berkowitz or turned out to be Berkowitz, take the ticket off the windshield, throw it on the passenger seat, and then watch the cop car that gave him the ticket go down the block. And then he got in his car and followed the cop car. And at the end of the block, the cop car made a right, and Berkowitz made a right, away from the shooting. So, Maurice Terry actually, years later, reenacted this whole scene that I just described. And in my opinion, proved that Berkowitz couldn't have gotten back to the shooting site in time to do the shooting, because again, there was eyewitnesses at the shooting. So the police know exactly when the shooting took place. The police know exactly when that ticket was given out because the cops wrote the time in, and there was an eyewitness watching the cops give a ticket out. So none of that makes sense. The police can do whatever they want and they can spin it any way they want, but it just doesn't work. And that's what Maury concentrated on, because there was so many eyewitnesses to that shooting.
So at that point, there's evidence that potentially there's more than one son of Sam here, not just David Berkowitz. Although Berkowitz does eventually, on August 10th of 1977, get arrested after police investigate his car that's parked on the street outside of his apartment building on Pine Street in Yonkers. They see a gun in the back seat. They search the car. They find a duffel bag filled with ammunition, maps of crime scenes, and they even have a threatening letter addressed to Inspector Timothy Dowd of the Omega Task Force. I believe it's saying something to the effect of wanting to do something at a discotheque in Long Island, if I remember right.
Yes, you were correct.
Okay.
So that whole situation was kind of strange too. First of all, the cops broke into the car,
right,
without a search warrant, which would have been interesting if Berkowitz didn't plead guilty, because all the law experts say that they would have had a hard time convicting Berkowitz of certainly the last shooting, because all the evidence they had pointing to his guilt would have been inadmissible because of the illegal search. So that's something we'll never know, but interesting to note.
Right. And very odd that they didn't wait for a search warrant. It wouldn't have taken very long, I'm sure, to get a search warrant for that. But they chose to go ahead and just grab this stuff anyways. So a paper bag containing that .44 caliber Bulldog revolver was identified in ballistics test found next to Berkowitz in the car. Berkowitz then stated flatly, "Well, you got me." And he just pretty much gave himself up at that point. The way it went down, Detective, is it Filatico? Says, "Now that I've got you, who have I got?" And it says, the man said in what the detective remembered was a soft, almost sweet voice. He says, "You know." He says, "No, I don't. You tell me." The man turned his head and said, "I'm Sam." He says, "You're Sam? Sam who?" He said, "Sam, David Berkowitz." And that's according to the story. Berkowitz evidently is interrogated for about 30 minutes in the early morning of August 11th of 1977. He quickly confesses to the shooting and expressed an interest in pleading guilty right away. Which, again, is also unusual that he's willing to go down for the entire thing. During questioning, Berkowitz claimed that his neighbor's dog was one of the reasons that he killed, stating that the dog demanded the blood of pretty young girls. He said that the Sam mentioned in the first letter was his former neighbor, Sam Carr. Berkowitz claimed that Harvey, Carr's black Labrador retriever, was possessed by an ancient demon and that it used irresistible commands that Berkowitz must kill people. A few weeks after his arrest and confession, Berkowitz was permitted to communicate with the press. In a letter to the New York Post dated September 19th of 1977, Berkowitz alluded to his original story of demonic possession, but closed with a warning that had been interpreted by some investigators as an admission of criminal accomplices. He said, "There are other sons out there. God help the world." So in that, there's your admission from Berkowitz that there are others. And with that, Maurice Terry is kind of, I guess, not vindicated, but unleashed upon the world to try and find these others. And that's where the special picks up and shows Maurice Terry's journey to find these others. And what's interesting is without giving too much away about the special, and I do encourage people to watch this. This is a fascinating special about what he does. And he does write a book called The Ultimate Evil, which I do encourage people to read as well. In that he
don't forget my book.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carl. Mention your book as well.
No. Yeah, it's Maury's book, The Ultimate Evil, is the blueprint for the Son of Sam case. And to me, if you're interested in Son of Sam, it's a must read. I wrote a book recently, a couple months ago. It's called The Son of Sam and Me: The Truth About Why I Wasn't Shot, by David Berkowitz. Mine's a much easier read. It kind of it's 182 pages versus 650 pages from The Ultimate Evil. I kind of condensed the shootings to a couple pages for each shooting, and then go back to each shooting and explain why. What clues the police missed or chose to ignore. So.
Well, now, here's what I was going to...
Both of them are good reading.
Okay. Well, here's what I was going to bring up, Carl. So at this point, Maurice Terry is putting together the clues eventually that he's going to put in his book. He's researching, and I'm just going to drop a few things in here so that people can get an idea. I'm not going to give away the entire special here on the show. He's going down the rabbit hole, and he's putting together that John Wheat Carr, or John Wheaties, is also connected with his brother Michael Carr. And that, David Berkowitz had said he was a loner. He was not. That David Berkowitz, in his upbringing, had connected with some people who had called themselves the Children, and that they were involved in the occult. And that, and some listeners of the show that also listen to our paranormal show, Darkness Radio, will especially love this show, and that there are connections to the occult in here, and that I don't say that in a salacious way, by the way, Carl, but in that this has tentacles to different areas of what you may look into as conspiracy theory, but it's not conspiracy theory. It's very much grounded in reality. There is a tentacle here that reaches out to what's called the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which is an offshoot of Scientology. There are different offshoots here where Maurice Terry gets deeper and deeper and finds out that David Berkowitz is really connected to, for lack of a better term, I guess you could say here, Carl, secret societies. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure about secret societies. He's definitely connected to the Process Church, or remnants of the Process Church. The Process Church, as far as I know, was, I guess some people would consider it part of the occult. They're very, I don't know, to me it's a very strange thing. They worship Satan and God, and they kind of distort the the Bible, love thy enemy. Well, if Satan's your enemy, then you should love Satan. That's it's, to me, it's bizarre thinking, but that was the process church's.
They're chaos agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, I guess if that's what you meant by Berkowitz being involved in, in that, yes, I guess, yes.
And
it's never, Berkowitz has never said that he's part of like PSYOPs or,
right.
some secret government program, but, there's certainly, if you do enough digging into this case, which I have, there definitely are signs that people involved in the Son of Sam, quite possibly were involved in some kind of government CIA type stuff.
What's interesting about this too is the process church of the final judgment is also mentioned by Manson and in the family. They also have their, let's just say they're influenced by the process of the final judgment. A lot of their devious ways were influenced by the process of the final judgment.
Yes. Yeah.
So their tentacles are everywhere. And what's interesting about this special is that there's so much more to the Son of Sam case than just, and I shouldn't say just the killings, the 8 people who died in New York City. I don't want to trivialize that because 8 people lost their lives. Or I should say it wasn't 8 people who lost their lives, but 8 people were shot. Six lost their lives. 8 were shot. Right. It's a fascinating special. Now here's where you may say, okay, so what I had an interesting little twist or turn at the end of this here, folks, that I want to present to you. Carl has actually picked up the work of Maurice Terry. And I want to point out too that Maurice Terry's work actually spun off in a weird direction. And Carl, I know you may think this is odd, but Maurice Terry had good intentions with his work, and that was to bring out into the light of day the occult and their evil doings, which he did. He successfully brought it out. I think one of the bad things that happened as a result of that was a little bit of the satanic panic in the late 70s, early 80s. But I think the only reason that happened was because he was so passionate in getting that agenda out there. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. In fact, I'm a firm believer in that whole satanic panic was an operation in itself to kind of ridicule and make fun of what was really going on, and not just in the Son of Sam. There really was satanic practices going on, and they still go on today. But it's a good way to deflect the truth is to make fun of it and to say it's all hogwash. And I firmly believe that satanic panic came about. One of the main reasons why it came about was Maurice Terry's book that came out in 1987.
Now, what's interesting is I was trying to explain to someone I'm close to that I was going to sit down and talk to you today. And I said, would you believe it if I told you that Carl was going to sit down with David Berkowitz and have a discussion with him? And her answer was, why on earth would he sit down and talk to David Berkowitz without knowing your story? And she was absolutely shocked. Her logic was the fact that she assumed that David Berkowitz shot you, not knowing the full story. And that's where most people would come from, thinking that, of course, Son of Sam is David Berkowitz, and David Berkowitz is the Son of Sam. So here's the question I'm going to ask before we go on and talk about how you're picking up Maurice Terry's work, and the fact that you recently sat down and had a visit with David Berkowitz, and we'll explain why in just a moment. My question would be, you're now picking up Maurice Terry's work. And not just you, but there is a group of people that towards the end of Maurice Terry's life, a group of you got together with Maurice Terry, and the idea was to finally flesh out this Son of Sam case and prove that there was more than just David Berkowitz that was behind the Son of Sam, that there were multiple sons of Sam. My question is, why is it important for us to know that there was more than one? And why is it important that we find out exactly who is behind it?
It's a good question. And the simple answer is, if there's other people involved, don't you think they deserve to pay the consequences? So that's, I think that was the impetus from the very beginning is, Berkowitz has openly admitted he killed 3 people. He did the 2 shootings in the Bronx, but he didn't do any of the shootings in Queens, and he didn't do the shooting in Brooklyn. He also admits he was at all the shootings. So I think just in our brief conversation today, we've alluded and shown some proof as to, other people were involved, from the sketches to eyewitnesses, seeing multiple people, multiple getaway cars. So I think that's what makes it important. From a criminal case, that's what makes it important to find out who else was involved and make them pay the price. From a personal point of view, I would like to know if Berkowitz didn't shoot me, then who did? And that's a question that I think anyone could appreciate, or an answer that I'm looking for that anyone could appreciate. Why me?
There's I have a more direct question for you, Carl, when it comes to exactly why you were shot in the shooting of Stacy Moskowitz. There was a van that was cited in the special, and there's a filmmaker who ended up turning up dead. And I know I'm bringing up something from the special, and I'm bringing it up, and maybe it's a little bit of a spoiler in the special, but I'm bringing it up for a reason. They said that essentially it was being filmed, that this murder was being filmed as a bit of a snuff film. I'm wondering, has it ever crossed your mind that maybe your shooting was done as a snuff film?
I would say no, only because anything's possible. And until I know exactly who was there and why they were there and so on and so forth, it'll remain a mystery. But based on what we do know, I would say no, because it was quite obvious in the Brooklyn shooting where that van was parked, and where Robert and Stacy were sitting in the car right underneath the street light. It was it was like a perfect storm. As some people have said, it was almost like it was a studio, for filming. The light was very bright. In fact, Tommy Zano and his girlfriend were parked in that same spot, and they were there to make out. And because it was so bright, they moved up about 30 or 40 feet, and 5-10 minutes later, Robert Violante pulls into that same spot, and the van's right across the street with the street light and so on and so forth. I have visited the site, and it's and believe me, it's well lit. Where I was shot, I purposely picked that spot because it wasn't lit. So I guess the short answer is I don't think my shooting was filmed.
Okay. The question then I have for you would be, you want to know, first of all, who shot you. So this brings about the question, as you pick up Mr. Terry's work, he's already interviewed David Berkowitz a couple of times. Now, in the special, and again, I don't want to give too much away, he's had one discussion with David Berkowitz that seemed to go amazingly well. He had another where he kind of pushed the agenda a little bit. I want to know how your discussions with David Berkowitz are going to differ from his discussions with David Berkowitz.
All right. I guess the first thing I want to say is the interviews that Maurice Terry did with David Berkowitz in '93 were I thought were excellent interviews. Maury asking questions, David Berkowitz answering. He did another series of interviews in '98, and I'm not sure why. It's something I never really discussed with Maury, and I probably should have. But he definitely is leading. His questions were posed with the implied answer that he was looking for, and that's a shame because it kind of for any Maury detractors, they cite those 1998 interviews and say, he was leading Berkowitz. Berkowitz just agreed to anything Maury said. And I have to say, it kind of did look like that. But if you go back to the 93 interviews, there was no leading at all. So how my interview with Berkowitz is going to differ is I'm certainly not going to lead. Unfortunately, well, before I say that, the conversation is not recorded.
Okay.
You need special permission, which I did not receive yet. And to be honest with you, I shouldn't say yet because I haven't even attempted. I just thought my first visit with Berkowitz would be much more productive if I did not bring in cameras and recording equipment. Because let me see. Let's face it. David Berkowitz is not going to, is not going to tell me a first time meeting me. It's not going to be a tell all, and he's not going to tell me everything I want to know. And as it turned out, he told me very little of specific information. But with that being said, I did spend 3.5 hours with him, and I rate the interview 8 out of 10. I thought it was, we opened up a line of communication. He was able to apologize to a victim, which I didn't realize it, but I realized it afterwards. Like, that was the first time in 45 years he actually was able to say, "I'm sorry," to a victim or a family member of a victim since this whole thing happened. So in that respect, I guess it was somewhat of a historic meeting. And he was, I have to tell you, he was very grateful for the opportunity to apologize to me.
I'm going to bring up the words of, and don't take this wrong, Carl. Don't take this wrong at all.
I won't.
I'm going to bring up the words of the New York newswoman who was on the special. And just as a precautionary measure, and I want to see what your reaction is when I bring them up. She points out that David Berkowitz is a known psychopath. And she doesn't know whether to believe anything that was in the 2 interviews that Maurice Terry did with Berkowitz, rather, and especially after the second interview where Mr. Terry is basically leading him, and it looks like he's just giving him whatever information he wants because he looks like he's uncomfortable and just wants to get out of there. Do you feel that potentially he gave you what you wanted because you were sitting in front of him? That he apologized to you because maybe he knew it just made you feel better?
Well, that's a good question. Let me say. All right. So I guess the first thing I want to say is I had corresponded with him. I don't know. I guess we're up to 12, 13, 14 letters. I'm not even sure.
Okay.
But since our first communication, he's been apologizing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that doesn't really mean anything. If he thinks that's what I want to hear, I'll be honest with you. In my world, if you do something against me and you apologize and I accept your apology, it's over with. I don't think I've ever received a letter from David Berkowitz where he didn't apologize again. I don't know what that means. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it makes it more, his apology stronger or weaker or what. What I will tell you though, for 3.5 hours sitting right in front of him, and just for you and your listeners to know, this is not a visit. This is not a visit where you pick up the phone and a glass partition separates you from the incarcerated. We sat at a lunch table, a 6-foot lunch table. David sat at the head of the table. I sat to his left. Howie Edelson sat to his right, and my girlfriend Trishkita sat at the other end of the table. I was, I was as close as you can be sitting next to somebody. And I have to tell you, all 3 of us agreed, when we left the prison, all 3 of us agreed that he truly is sincere. He truly is sorry. He even talked about how his life, how he just ruined his life. And, at one point he said, he goes, I got out of the Army. I just wanted to get married, have kids, get a job, just like the rest of us, and here he is 45 years later, and he's still lamenting the bad path that he went down. And it was very easy for us, and we all agreed on it. And maybe he's a master manipulator. Who knows? I don't think so. But all 3 of us agreed when we knew when he was telling a lie. Mm-hmm. We knew when he was telling the truth. Mm-hmm. We knew when he knew the truth but didn't want to tell us. And when he really didn't know the answer, his tells were just that plain to say. And again, who knows? You're in prison 45 years. You can practice anything. But I, if you want my opinion, I'm telling you, I believe that he's 100% sincere.
But follow me here, Carl.
Okay.
He's apologized to you 12 or 13 times within these letters. Mm-hmm. He's looked at you in the eye, face to face. You sat down, you visited with him now for three or so hours. Mm-hmm. if he's truly sorry, if he truly apologizes, if he's truly converted his life to Christianity, if he truly wants to make it up to you, and he knows who did it, wouldn't he look you in the eye, Carl, and say, this is who shot you? I know who shot you, and this is who did it?
That is the $64,000 question. And my answer to you is I'm hoping to get that answer. If not the next visit, the visit after that. I'm very confident that now that we've opened up a line of communication, that I will get some answers. For people who I guess this kind of answers your question also, like why wouldn't you just tell all right now? There's a lot of reasons for that. And the biggest reason is self-serving, of course. If he starts talking, and it's made public, he basically is going to lose all his everything. The little bit that he's got in jail, he's gonna lose. He has access to his ministry. He's able to go to the library, so on and so forth. If he starts talking, he's going to jail. 23-hour lockdown. This is my opinion, not his. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is, him telling me, and I told him this. I said, look, if you want our conversation to be totally private, I said, and you're willing to tell me what I need to know, but with the understanding that it won't become public, I said, we could do that. I said, because that's, my main goal is to find out who and why, for me personally, on a bigger scale. If I could get this case reopened and solved, that'd be great too. But I'd be more than happy just knowing why what happened to me, why, who, and I based on some of the things he said, I think at some point he is going to tell me. The other reason why he wouldn't be so forthcoming is who would you tell this to, except for true crime podcast. Who would you go to? Would you go to the NYPD? We've done that. They had a case right in front of them, and they shut it down on several occasions. So, that has a lot to do with it. Like, why start talking, not knowing where this information is going and who's going to do anything about it?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, New York City has just elected a mayor that was a former victim of New York Police Department violence. I mean, I would think that there's a sympathetic ear in the mayoral chair. Yeah,
I mean, he's only been in office for 10 days, but that's certainly a possibility. Yonkers police also. We getting our case reopened. We probably stand a better chance today than we did yesterday, based on just what you said. Eric Adams is a highly decorated cop. Now he's the mayor. But who knows? I don't know if you're aware, one of his proposals is to make armed robbery a misdemeanor. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of scary to me. I don't know. Yeah. You go into a bodega with a gun, and you get caught. It's no longer a felony. It's a misdemeanor. That's scary to me. But you know what? I'll give the guy the benefit of the doubt. And if we can get Berkowitz to talk, and the NYPD is willing to listen, I'm all for it.
I get what you're saying about there's no ally there. Unfortunately, if any of these people had crossed state lines, that you could develop some sort of federal case too. It's just a matter of. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the only I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Breslin letter was actually mailed from New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So I mean that could be like a little opening, but it's I'm not 100% sure of this, but I was told by a few FBI agents who are now retired that the FBI was involved in the Son of Sam back when it was going on, and we know obviously nothing came of it because the case was shut down, and not for nothing, Berkowitz is his own worst enemy, or my worst enemy, when it comes to that. Because if you go through the history, Berkowitz has changed his story so many times.
Yeah,
I understand why he changed it, but it certainly doesn't make him the credible witness you would hope he could be.
Right. That is true. You are fighting an uphill battle, Carl, when it comes to that. And I do admire you for picking up the sword and continuing Maurice Terry's work and trying to get answers for yourself as to why you were a victim of Son of Sam. I think it's brave on your part to pick that up, because you're not entirely sure as to whether the players in this are all dead and gone. You don't know for sure.
That's true.
That's
true. But I just, here's my rationale. You tell me if I'm out of my mind. But my rationale is if people are still walking the face of the earth that were involved in this 45 years ago, and they've never been arrested for it. Me rattling the cage these people, if they do exist, it would be best for them to just say he's out of his mind. I don't know what you're talking about, as opposed to coming after me. You know what I'm saying?
True, but
yeah.
You don't know if there's been future generations that have been trained and brought into the fold too. I mean.
Well, no, you're true. That's very true. Your statement is very true. What we do know is this, satanic worshiping is still going on. Mm-hmm. I mean, all you got to do is pick up the paper. I don't think a month goes by where you don't read a story somewhere across this large country of ours where, they found remains of whatever, a satanic ritual. And so in my opinion, it's still going on. Are the same people involved? I don't think they're involved in Yonkers anymore. But I think that they're still around. Yes.
Yeah, and,
I don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions that maybe will never be answered. But as long as I'm alive and have the mental capabilities of looking into it, I will continue to look into it and see where it leads me.
Absolutely, and again, I wish you the best of luck, Carl, and I hope that you find the answers that you're looking for there. And again, I want to encourage people to check out The Sons of Sam: A Descent into Darkness, which is available right now on Netflix. It's 4 1-hour episodes, and Carl plays a prominent part in those 4 episodes. And Carl, tell people the name of your book again and where they can find it.
Sure. It's called The Son of Sam and Me: The Truth About Why I Wasn't Shot, by David Berkowitz. It was. Let me see. My co-author is Brian Whitney. I always want to give him a shout out. And Wild Blue Press is the publisher, and it's available. It's available online at Amazon.
All right, and we'll grab a description of it or the link for it, and we'll put it in the description of this program, so you can just click on the link.
Oh, perfect.
And you can get a copy of it. while you're listening to the program here. All right, folks, if you are and Carl, I want to thank you very much for being on with me today and spending time with us today. It's, again, fascinating topic, and we really do appreciate you picking up Maurice Terry's work and continuing it.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Folks, I want to let you know that at this time, if you are a premium subscriber, it's time now for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. And if you subscribe to the free version of True Crime Tuesday, of course, it's time now for us to bid you adieu. But before we do so, let's remind you that you can get Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals by getting the premium version of this show. How do you do so? Well, it's easy. You go to Stitcher.com and you sign up for the premium service. And you just click on Get Premium. It's that little button there on Stitcher.com and sign up. It's just $5 a month. And with that $5 a month, you get not only Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals and the premium version of True Crime Tuesday, you also get the ad-free version of Darkness Radio and the premium version, of course, of Darkness Radio. And you get the ad-free version of hundreds of different podcasts that Stitcher has to offer, and some great quality entertainment at that over there on Stitcher. It'll open your eyes, it'll open your ears, and open your horizons over there at Stitcher, as there's some great quality podcasts. Check it out for yourself. Go to Stitcher.com and see everything that Stitcher has to offer in the world of podcasts. It's really quite amazing. Being a premium member myself, I've got to tell you, there's some great programs over there that you're going to want to check out. Go to Stitcher.com and click on premium and try it for yourself. Right now, you can get 30 days free. And just try it and get Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals. Check out what that's all about, and get Darkness Radio ad free, and enjoy the world of Stitcher Premium. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today for a great show. I think today we brought you two very interesting guests, and I want you to feel free to join us again next week for the best in true crime podcasting, True Crime Tuesday. We'll see you next week, everybody.